Top recommendation: do not do co-trustees. It just becomes a big management mess. Hi, Jeff Marsachi, the Plain English Attorney, and welcome to the video. Today we're going to talk about how to do inheritances and what's the best way to do it, or is there really a best way? So this is coming from r/estate planning on Reddit. Method of distributing assets to your heirs. Have there been studies of what method of distributing assets and their effect, I guess that is. I generally see something along the lines of 25, 30, and 35. Sometimes someone will distribute all at once at 35, etc. Under normal circumstances, I would expect the age limit not to matter, since the heir would be older when the decedent passes away. These provisions are most likely to prevent the money from ruining the kids' lives when the parents die suddenly. One thought is that one can have the trustee make judgment calls as to whether the person can have it sooner. Let's say the heir is responsible. A release of funds in their 20s might give them benefits than in their 40s. Conversely, do people put in a provision to not release the fund if the heir has become a drug addict? What would be a good check on the trustee to prevent them from abusing their position? If you think it's important for educational videos like this to get out there, then please help us out by subscribing to the channel. All right, so there's a lot of good stuff in that question, but what it's really coming down to is, what are you going to give the trustee in terms of leeway and judgment and letting them handle things versus what are the actual age limits that you want to put on things? Do you have clauses, what if they become a drug addict, or things like that? So let's go ahead and see what kind of advice was given by the other attorneys in the thread. It depends what the clients want, of course, but typically they agree it makes sense for the trustee to have the discretion to make distributions that they think are best for the beneficiaries, like the beneficiary's health or education, with mandatory distributions at certain age milestones. It's not uncommon to include language in a trust allowing the trustee to postpone distributions if the trustee believes the beneficiary has a harmful addiction or other problem. It might even be part of a spendthrift clause. Now, that's important. We do have that in the trust that we do, but you're going to see as I get into my contribution to the thread that we don't want to give the money too early. The trustees in my state have responsibilities to the beneficiaries in terms of what needs to be reported, but beneficiaries often don't know about it or what the information may mean. One way to keep a trustee honest is to have a co-trustee. Oh, no. Professional fiduciary as trustee or a trust director overseeing management of the trust. All depends on the estate and their goals. That is kind of the top recommendation. Do not do co-trustees. It just becomes a big management mess. And look, the whole idea is if you don't trust your trustee and you need to put in a co-trustee to keep them honest, really you should be looking at other trustees. We'll get to that. Can one set up a professional trustee that can be tapped to do a second evaluation if the original trustee is not doing their job? How would they be paid? I think professional fiduciary usually work off a percentage of the assets. You can structure the trust to assign different responsibilities to several different trustees, but I'm curious who would evaluate whether the trustee is, quote, not doing their job. If the trustee isn't making distributions or something more unsavory, the beneficiaries often have recourse to remove the trustee under the terms of the trust for cause and maybe even appoint a new one in some cases. Depending on the language, that is absolutely true, and it's a good fail-safe. That's the check, not a co-trustee. If you want reports to go to a representative of the beneficiary class, such as a professional trustee, they might have more wherewithal to judge whether the trustee is acting appropriately. The issue with professionals is that they'll typically charge a percentage of the managed assets annually if they're serving as a trustee, with sliding percentages as the assets increase. They are paid from a trust as a cost of administration. That's true, and there's a pretty decent range of what you would be paying a professional trustee, like a trust company. But, again, big point, the larger the assets, the smaller the percentage. And, again, a follow-up to that from the poster. Thanks. One reason I might consider a professional is to avoid family issues. Yes. A family member as a trustee might make that member unpopular. I know of someone who became an executor to her siblings' estate. The heirs did not agree with the will and blamed the executor for essentially sticking to the will. Okay, let me make a comment on that. There are so many times when people just say as beneficiaries, well, that's not fair. Well, no, it's got to follow the will. What your feelings are doesn't make any difference. If you're going to have someone as a family member who's involved in being the executor, looking at these types of issues and family conflict, that's something to keep in mind. But when you are naming multiple successive trustees, one after the other, having that company in as a backup to be there if everybody resigns and just let the company handle it isn't a bad strategy either. As a result, the heirs never spoke to their aunt again. In instances like this, losing a few % of the estate would be worth reducing the amount of conflict. Let the professional be the bad person. That's true too. Another comment, conflict of interest. Professional trustee would like to milk it for as long as they can. They do charge a fee to manage. Well, yeah, but it's not like that's the norm. Holding it back longer, getting that bad reputation is going to help ruin their business if they do it that way. There is no real check on the trustee's actions. That is why it is always imperative that you choose someone who is trustworthy, and nearly as imperative that you choose someone competent. The third quality you need is someone who's going to be available when the time comes. All very good, very true points, and that's definitely things to take into consideration when you're picking a trustee. The core of this is finding the best trustees to start with. Answering your other question, yes, you can give the trustee the discretionary authority to distribute any or all of the corpus at any time for any reason. Okay, let's say I pick a professional trustee. How would one evaluate the integrity of a firm? You have a sense of who is trustworthy when it's a relative, but not so much with the firm. And yeah, that's true. If the size of the estate is large enough, go with the big name bank and trust companies everyone has heard of, or just ask your trust attorney for recommendations. Assets under management. If they have hundreds of millions under management, they have no incentive to steal $10,000. Fees might be high, but they won't steal. No. One of the biggest banks around, for opening other checking accounts without clients' permission to get a couple of bucks a month in service fees. And man, did they get slapped for that. Just because they're big doesn't mean they're good. Personally, I prefer giving the beneficiary an annual power to withdraw, say 10%, to the big chunks every 5 years approach. So every year, 10%. Really situation dependent, though, and that's about as true as you can get. Thing is, oh yeah, you get 10%. Okay, how much in drugs can I buy with that? Whoa. You probably want to have some more checks on that. Imagine someone that it's 25, you could take out 10%. And here's where we're getting to my contribution. In general, most of my clients are using a flexible age of inheritance of 40. This means the trustee is able to distribute money to the beneficiary, pay for expenses they deem appropriate, and even distribute the money earlier than 40 if they believe the beneficiary is ready. However, at age 40, absent disability or incapacity, they have to distribute the remainder of their assets whether they are responsible or not. Now, I'm going to also put in that little caveat, the trust we do, there is some wiggle room and leeway if there is something like a drug addiction. There's a huge difference from being under some kind of disability or incapacity or even a drug addiction as opposed to, yeah, they just ain't good with money. Most of my clients agree. If someone hasn't gotten their act together by age 40, they probably aren't going to ever. So holding back the money doesn't do anything. Regarding trustees, my clients are typically choosing friends and family members they trust, and I push for at least 3 to serve in succession. Again, one after the other, not co-trustees. And then put in a corporate trustee as a backup. If you are concerned about your chosen trustees not, quote, playing fair, or more seriously, not playing by the rules, then the question probably isn't about how the trust is structured, but who you are choosing as trustees. A lot of my clients feel obligated to name their adult children as trustees, even if they don't think they would do the best job. And there is no such obligation. Name the best people for the job. The trust my firm works with have mechanisms for dealing with and or removing wayward trustees, but it's better to pick good trustees up front. As for not having anyone you trust to name as trustee, well, then there's little choice but to go with a professional trustee like a trust company. Which should you choose? This is where you want to go to your financial advisor, that professional, and see, is there a trust company that they recommend? If you like the job that your financial advisor is doing, then you're probably going to like the job of the recommended trust company that they're typically working with. They often do have a kind of vested interest, and they want to keep managing the money for the next generation, and working with these trust companies, sometimes that's exactly what happens. So if you like the way your financial advisor is handling things, you probably want that to kind of continue into the next generation as well. So going with their recommendation. So I hope you found that information useful. I hope the poster found that information useful on some of these different tactics and what you should be doing. In general, I like to give the trustee a lot of discretion. They can always give the money early if they think the beneficiary is going to handle it well, but not. But that cutoff age of 40 is usually, like I said, if you haven't gotten your act together by the time you're 40, you're probably not going to. So please go ahead, check out the links below. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do that. And as I always tell my clients, please stay safe, plan ahead, and enjoy life. And whatever you do, make it a great day.